Hey, Typology friends, welcome back. Today is a big day. We have a Type 8 in the house. Please welcome Dr. Terence Lester, author of the new book, From Dropout to Doctorate. He is also the founder of Love Beyond Walls. He is a powerhouse. Terence, welcome to the show.
I am really grateful to be here. And I have a question before we get into all of what we're talking about. Why did you choose to bring me on?
That's a good question.
Can I say one thing while you're thinking, Ian?
Yeah, I don't have to think long, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, to begin with, we don't get, our eights are too far in between. Is that the right word? Phrase to say. So it really is great to have an 8 on the show. So I'm looking forward to that. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, that's part of it, right? Like, because we have 9 types, we try to get represented on the show, right? And so if we have too many 3s in a row, 5s in a row, I start getting emails from people saying, you don't pay attention to the 6s and the 8s and this, that, So we got to, kind of pace everything out. But I also really like your mission and your work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
And I just wanted to give it a platform for people to hear about it. And also because the alignment between your type and your work is so perfect. And also because you sent me this nice note describing your interaction with the Enneagram and all about how important it's been to you. And I'm like, yeah, this is perfect. Let's have this guy on. So I'm thrilled to have you, man.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I can't wait to go deeper.
Yeah, let's try.
I could add to that. I spent 8 years of my late 20s and early 30s in the inner city, and loved every minute of it. Seeing some really powerful transformation. So I'm excited as well.
Yeah. If you ever want to learn about your vulnerabilities, your shadows, go spend time where pain is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but I'm learning.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
That is for sure. That is my experience. So let's start at the beginning. You're an Enneagram 8, and tell folks about yourself, what you do, and how you came to learn about your Enneagram type.
Yeah. So, name is Terrence. I'm originally residing in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where me and my family stay. I've been married going on 19 years. Woohoo! We got to celebrate that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and have 2 wonderful kids, and I call them wonderful because I am very close to my children. My daughter's a senior, and my son is a freshman in high school. And my family has taught me a lot about who I am and who I am not by getting the chance to serve them. But also they have supported me in the work that I've done through a nonprofit organization that I've started called Love Beyond Walls. And basically, just in brevity, the organization itself advocates on behalf of those who are unhoused or faced with housing instability, and also works with people who are impoverished in our communities. And when I talk about impoverished, I'm talking about people who may not have a meal tonight, right? Students who leave school who may be sleeping in a motel or shelter, and the only meal that they ate throughout the day was at school, or someone who is standing on a corner begging for change, right, with the sign. We've all seen people who are unhoused with those signs, who's trying to beg for change to not use drugs, not to go and buy alcohol, but to raise money because they need access to their medicine because maybe they're living on the streets with a medical illness, or those who are living with a disability. And so we try to approximate ourselves to that community in ways in which we're standing in solidarity with them, but also building community around them. I like to say that we are not just out here doing charitable acts, but we're building relationships, right? And I've been doing this work for over a decade. And man, I tell you, like I said earlier, if you ever want to know about your leadership, who you are, how you're wired, the testing of all of that, is go serve those who are in pain, because it's not just about showing up in a community and saying, oh, I'm going to do good. It's about seeing others, right? But also allowing yourself to be seen, right? It's about showing up with the fullness of who you are, your vulnerabilities, your fears, your shortcomings, all of those things, because that is what makes whole community. And I would say about 5 years into my leadership, I thought I was doing a good job. People told me I was doing a good job, but I kept hitting a glass ceiling, right? And I was wondering, like, why would I get frustrated, right? Why would I be angry or aggressive, or why would something in the news irritate me to the point where I just wanted to like go and tip over the TV? Why would injustice really like irk my nerves? And when I would be in a conversation with other leaders, it didn't bother them as much. And then one day, a leader friend of mine said, "Have you ever heard of the Enneagram?" And I'm like, "What's that?" I've taken all the personality tests, right? I know my strengths. I know what they say my weaknesses are. But he was like, "No, it's kind of deeper than that, right? It gives you insights as to how you are wired, what are the patterns that develop when you're under stress, right? It gives you deeper insights as to how you're actually wired, not to box you in, but to show you how you grow beyond the box or the confinements of your personality, right? But it also shows you like, how do you interact with other people? How do I lead? How do I show up in community? How do I interact with my staff, those people who are serving alongside of me? How do I represent the best version of myself? And what are those things that I need to do? And so, because I know I'm a challenger, right? I took that test, right? I went all in. I researched. I found an institute. I did the whole things. I got with a colleague of mine who understood it more than me. I bought the books, right? And I just kept learning and learning and learning. And what that showed me was parts of myself that I didn't fully understand, or until I was able to articulate that, right? And I think there's something special about naming how you're wired or who you are as a person, because it gives you the strength and the courage to confront parts of yourself that may remain hidden. And so that's kind of my introduction into how I learned about the Enneagram. And then I started to see like, oh, wow, I'm actually, this is how I'm made. Like, I'm wired to advocate, to challenge, to speak truth to power, to show up in community, to protect, to do all of these things. And then I started to see it as a superpower almost, right? That I don't have to push away from these things. This is things that I can actually lean into. So that's my short spiel. Yeah.
Man, let's just take a collection and close in prayer. That was perfect. That was perfect. So, in this wonderful note that you sent me, and I'm going to draw from it because there's so many good little things in here that you sent along with other materials, right? And you mentioned that, this growing self-awareness, that this is how I'm wired, right? But also helping you understand when you're starting to drift into unhealthy patterns, right? And you mentioned over control, defensiveness, and burnout. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the great things about the Enneagram is not just that it shows you um, things that you're naturally have a natural bent towards, but it gives you this, I would call it a beautiful picture of what it looks like when you're unhealthy. And the reason why I call it beautiful now is because I didn't in the beginning, right? I
Mm-hmm.
just thought I was just having a bad day. It lets me know um, what I am doing or how I am functioning in my life that may be causing me to drift into an unhealthy pattern, right? Whether it's, operating from a fear, right? Something that is fear based in my gut level, like something that when I feel like I'm losing control, when I feel like things aren't necessarily going my way, right? When I feel like I can't protect or I can't function in the way that I'm naturally bent, right? It pushes me into a unhealthy place. And that could look like overworking, right? Or working to the point where I want to try to use work as a vehicle to control what I'm unable to control in the first place. Or it may look like something not happening the way that I want to, and then my default mode, or I may be more harsh, right? And so I think it's a beautiful a beauty in that now when I feel myself doing those things, I can check myself. That self-awareness is so powerful because it's like, hey, hold up. I need to step back. I'm moving into an unhealthy place. And I get the chance to ask myself, what is it that I need in this moment for me, right? To care for myself so I can move back into a healthier place.
Hmm. Yes. And this is so important, right? Especially when you're talking about community work, because, so oftentimes people that don't have the capacity to stand back or even to take time in solitude away from community,
Yes.
people who are unable, I think it was Merton who said that a person who who can't be alone is a person that is actually a danger to their community.
Mm.
Wow.
Which I think is really a big word, right?
Yeah.
Like knowing when to pull back, when I need
Yes.
to So on that score as an 8, like what do you do when you start to feel like the wheels are wobbling a little bit, like, I don't know, just opening the New York Times this morning makes me feel like my everything's wobbling, like, or out of control. What kinds of practices do you have, or what kinds of things do you do to try to keep yourself in the sort of the center of where you want to be, a grounded, faithful person? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. I would like to tell a personal story here. I was I'd gone out to dinner with my wife in 2022. Up until that point, I believe that we had done really great work. I'd grown and become more self-aware, the whole nine. And we were out celebrating. We had just won an award for our work in the community. And most times, eights tend to just move right to the next thing, right? It's like, what
Mm-hmm.
else can we conquer and, take over or whatever? And I decided to pause, slow down, and celebrate. My wife, uh, we go out to dinner, and I asked her if she could drive when we leave there, right? And she agrees. It's late at night. I fall asleep in the passenger seat. I wake up on the ground, and I look up and I see a mangled car. A car had hit us. My wife is limping around the car. I had blacked out, and I see EMTs running over to my body, and I hear one yell out, "Flip him over to see if he's still alive." I wake back up in the hospital with an ortho surgeon standing over me saying, I have good news and bad news. The good news is we operated. It took about 10 hours. But the bad news is that it'll be maybe a year to a year and a half before you could walk again, right?
Mm.
My whole life is flipped upside down. I think it's Brueggemann that talks about orientation to disorientation to a new orientation, right?
Yes.
And so I'm in this place where my entire life is disoriented, right? Out of the blue. I stay a month in the hospital, I get out, and now I'm confined to a bed, right? And I had to really wrestle with some things like self-worth, right? Why is
Mm.
my self-worth, my sense of self-worth tied to mobility and the
Mm.
ability to produce? Like, why am I wired this way? Why is it that I feel less worthy when I'm not being as productive as I thought I should be, right? Or do I still have anything to contribute to the world around me? These were real life changing, uh, life orienting questions. But one of the things that I learned going through this process is that my worth within itself is not given to me. My worth is just because I have breath in my body, not because of mobility, not because someone is celebrating me, not because I am achieving something, not because I am functioning in what I would perceive as my highest self. And so I had to really wrestle that. Coming out of that, on the other side, I can walk now. Thanks be to God. But it caused me to learn how to slow down. So like, I'm not as eager to be productive. When I feel like life's pressure is clamping down on me, I can, I've learned how to go for the walk in nature. I've learned how to name things, right? Because eights can tend to bottle everything up and not necessarily speak with vulnerability and name the things that are actually going on the inside, right? And naming may look like journaling. Naming may look like having a safe space in a trusted relationship that will create the type of space where I can just name what I am carrying. And the beautiful thing about naming and getting out in nature and movement, the movement of your body, is that it causes you to release the stress and the buildup that's happening on the inside of you. And then I think laughter, right? I learned how to laugh, right? Because eights can be very serious all the time, right? When I was confined to a bed, it was during the summertime. Me and my family, we watched a couple of movies every single day, every single night. We played Uno, we played card games, we laughed, we joked with each other. And it's not to say that I didn't laugh before, but it was the type of pause in my life and the type of disorientation that caused me to enjoy the present moment more than I had been prior, because laughter and joy are also forms of resistance to what's happening around us, right? There's always something beautiful to look at, to appreciate, to value. And then I started to adopt what I would call a grateful list, right? Or a gratitude list, right? Because sometimes we forget, like, it's the water bottle in front of me. I'm on technology. I'm looking at you through a computer screen. This computer costs thousands of dollars. It's a Mac laptop. I have books on the shelf. My son and my daughter just walked into the house. Like, there's things all around us that gives us the ability to ground ourselves in what I would call a grateful ethic, right? And out of that overflows this love. And so I've just literally learned how to balance between what does it mean to show up in work, but not allowing work to define my worth. And also, how do I stay in the present moment? Because eights tends to rush to the next thing, to the point where I get a chance to appreciate the fullness of life around me.
That's so good. And you actually mentioned a couple of things that we actually were talking about earlier today. One is just about the importance of getting outside and moving.
Yes.
No screens, no AirPods, nothing.
Yes.
Just you and the birds.
Yes.
And
the
get
trees.
bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the trees, man. And I don't get bored. I can see where some people, if you're used to constant stimulation, it might initially be kind of feel like a boring experience. But I find it just life-giving. And I'm just telling people all the time, man, like, you just need to go hiking. You need to just go just outside.
Move. Mm-hmm. It releases serotonin in the brain. It puts you in another state of mind, state of being. It grounds you. It disrupts you in a healthy way, right? And it feels awkward at first, because it did for me. But when I was going through my rehabilitation process, it became the practice that gave me courage and resilience and appreciation for another opportunity to walk again. I mean, I was in a wheelchair for almost a year, using forearm crutches and all of those things. And it became the breath of fresh air. And it's funny because I understand that people go through traumatic events similar to mine, and, they're real things. But I even, was processing this with therapists, and I did research on not post-traumatic stress, but post-traumatic growth, right?
Yes.
And changing the framework of what is coming from this, because it's always a coming from this in the moments that may seem overwhelming in your life. And so it's a new orientation is what I'm saying. Like, you have to literally rewire with practice, right? That's the beauty of practice. You get a chance to practice this, and you don't see it as a task. And I moved from like, oh, this is just another thing that I have to do, to this is something that I get to enjoy because it frees me up to experience the fullness of life.
Hey, Typology listeners, like you, I strive to know myself better and become a more compassionate and self-aware person, both at home and at work. Now, by far, the Enneagram is the best tool I have found for helping me to realize that in my life. And while taking an Enneagram test to help figure out your type is a great starting point, many tests out there provide content that is difficult to digest on your own, not to mention the fact that many tests are poorly constructed. That's why I've worked hard for the past few years to create a quick and research-backed assessment that provides straightforward insights specific for your type, subtype, and wing, while also being easy to understand. Simply put, my new Typology Institute Enneagram Assessment offers incredibly useful information that you can use immediately to incorporate the genius of the Enneagram into every area of your life. And as a Typology listener, you can take 10% off your assessment when you enter the discount code Typology Podcast on the checkout page. Just visit typologyinstitute.com/assessments to get your results today. You know, what's so beautiful about what you're saying is that what I'm hearing is, and it's always a sign, when I'm with people in your particular line of work, I often listen to whether or not they have a contemplative life, right? So we know that there's this old trope, right? Like that in the spiritual life, we must be both active and contemplative. And if you're just an activist, then you run the risk of becoming an angry, bitter, resentful person, right? And self-righteous and morally pugnacious, right? On the other hand, if you're just a contemplative, right? Walking in the woods, praying, doing your practices, right? But not paying attention to poverty, homelessness, issues around justice, education, whatever they may be, then you're becoming so heavenly minded, you're of no earthly good, right? You're just so. But the spiritual life must be both active and contemplative. Both Martha and Mary, right?
That's right.
Has to bear both. And it sounds like you have a rich contemplative life. Are you influenced by contemplative thinkers at all?
Yeah. One of my favorite spiritual writers is Henri Nouwen.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, man, I read all of Nouwen's work throughout my 20s, which gave me language. I mean, the returning of home, turning my mourning into dancing, those types of books, the prodigal son. But I mean, all of that language was, with open hands, that book about not being so close fisted with your life and with your, so all of that kind of gave me language of the power that comes from the contemplative life, right? And out of that space, not only do I get filled up as just a person and a human being, but I enjoy that, right? It's part of me that found joy in the richness of the contemplative journey. But when I go out and I'm proximate to the pains, it shows up there. I think it was Nouwen too. I have a funny story. This happened in 2019. I think it was 2019, 2018, something like that. I was asked to come and sit on the poverty panel, right? And this is funny. So uh, it's two people on the poverty panel, me and Father Gregory Bull, right?
Oh, right.
And so it's just me and him. And the people who invited me did not know that I had traveled to California, saw Homeboy Industries, read the book. It was one of the reasons that inspired me to start my work. And so now I get a chance to be on the panel 6 years after I've started with Father Gregory Moore. And we're sitting there and you know, he's talking about radical love. And, I'm trying to flow with him with, things that I've learned just from doing this work. And I started quoting Nouwen, right? I'm like, yeah, Nouwen says, you know how you,
Yeah, right.
I'm like, Nouwen says, you got to be weak with the weak. You have to suffer with those who are suffering because he's describing compassion. And Gregory Boyle, Father Boyle turns to us me. He says, yeah, I remember that. I remember it when he taught me in class. And everybody starts laughing. I was like, what? It's just like this moment here was he actually took a class from uh, uh, Henri Nouwen as a professor, right? And he remembers when Nouwen was saying this to his
Wow.
class when he was being developed. And Father Boyle is like, a little up in age. And it was just this moment of like, wow, that ethic of contemplative practice is a wellspring of life. Um, it reaches all sorts of people from all walks of life. And here it is. We had this moment where out of that practice, right, came this work that we were talking about on this panel. Why is it important to suffer with those who are impoverished? Why is it important to be proximate to those who have been marginalized or overlooked or unseen, right, in society and culture? Because it's coming from this place of love, right? That only can be found in the contemplative, right? When you get a chance to create the type of space where you think about love in ways that is radical, that is boundless, where you get to explore it not only for yourself, but then as you explore it for yourself and you become more self-aware, you get to practice that in the real world. So that, man, all of that is just it's life.
Yes,
That's
it is.
beautiful.
That was a good story, though. I'll never forget that. And then he wrote the full word to my second book that I published. So that was cool.
So
Wow.
beautiful. Yeah, and
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Father Greg Boyle's work is really quite remarkable. I remember reading his first book.
Tattoos on the heart, right?
Yeah, Tattoos on the Heart, and just being just really stunned. And he's funny, because he doesn't fall into the Nowenish. Nouwen was an academic and very much a pastor in a way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And also a very tortured soul. I mean, he was a
Yes.
wounded healer for
Yes.
sure.
Exactly.
And I love Greg Boyle's heart, and just commend that book to everybody listening. Tattoos on the Heart is a deeply, deeply meaningful. Um, it's not a memoir, but it is kind of a memoir of his work with gangs in Los Angeles, and quite stunning, quite stunning. So, you tell me about your upbringing.
Yeah. Um, I mean, grew up in the city of Atlanta in a on Southwest Atlanta. So if you can imagine any city, you look at history, city is divided by roads and highways due to red lines that were drawn, right, to concentrate poverty in predominantly black neighborhoods. I grew up on the side of town that just so happened to be affected by some of that architecture, and which I would call it hostile architecture, right? Hostile architecture is just not that which excludes those who are unhoused, but it can be in the form of buildings and roads and so on and so forth. I grew up there. You talk about poverty, you talk about social justice being impacted by the ways in which the residue from the civil rights movement, I mean, you're talking about 1980s, '90s. We see Rodney King riots. We see some of the things that are happening politically, right? We just see Shirley Chisholm on the ballot, and so all of these things are happening, and I'm growing up in that context. But not only that, the concentration of poverty in the community creates trauma. I mean, I even write about this in the new book that poverty itself is a form of trauma. And most times when
Yes.
people talk about poverty, they only talk about it in a singular form, right? About economics. No, poverty is social. Poverty is occupational. Poverty is environmental. Poverty is physiological, psychological, environmental. Poverty has a lot of different dynamics because poverty erodes the entire well-being of a person, right? And so I experienced that. I grew up in a single parent household, watched my mom work her hands to the bone to care for me and my sister, but also she found segues and resilience long before online classes and all of that stuff to overcome and become a doctorate or doctor in clinical counseling. And so while I have my mom's resilience and her affinity towards academics, I also had another side where I saw a lot of men in my family not actually graduate from college. I'm the only PhD in my family that's a man, right, in my
Hmm.
family right now. And I like to think of that labor and sacrifice of academic love as creating the pathway for others who may come after me. And so I grew up in that context and experienced brief moments of homelessness as a teen, was in gangs, dropped out of high school, actually went back to school as a fifth year senior, right? Most embarrassing time of my life. Not because I did not have the potential or the intellect, right? It's that, when you live in social environments, it creates trauma within itself and it can produce educational outcomes that may not be favorable for some. And so I fell on the side of that coin. And when I went back as a fifth year senior, because my mom advocated for me not to get a GED, but to actually finish high school, and the correct term for that now is fifth year persister or 6 year persister. These are students who dare to go back. And I had this teacher, Miss West. Miss West, a young black woman, first year of teaching. She was trauma informed. She was a geometry teacher, 10th grade geometry teacher, and she allowed me to use her classroom as a sanctuary. She opened up her classroom and she was like, I remember one day I'm sitting in class and she sees me despondent. Like I'm a fifth year senior, other educators wondering why I'm here. I got my peers making jokes, right? Super senior, all of these things. I'm embarrassed. This is the most embarrassing time of my life. And she walks over to my desk. I'm a fifth year senior in a 10th grade class, right? So if you can imagine that. And she says, "You're black, you're brilliant, and one day you're going to be a leader." She looks at me in my eyes and says that. And she says, "Whenever you feel the weight of the world, I want you to use my classroom as a sanctuary." And so, I would go in there the days when things were going on at home where that was too overwhelming, or I was experiencing with some type of emotional trauma or some type of lack that caused me not to have a positive outlook. I would go in that classroom and I think you're making me connect this, like I learned the contemplative in that space, outside of the noise, the hallways, the teachers. Like she would allow me to come in there and sit by myself and just kind of ground myself, even as a teenager. And she would encourage me, even after I passed her class and moved on. She would see me in the hallway. Come on, sit in the class. You could do it. Like she offered me tutoring, and she was a large part of why I graduated school and believed her and an example of my mother, why education was a pathway out of that type of environment. And so I'm not suggesting that that is something that is easy, where it's like one day you have a dream and you get contemplative and you overcome, right? It's a series of people who saw the best in me, that stood in solidarity with me, that became my
Right.
community, that allowed me to borrow their courage until I had enough for myself to believe it for myself, right? And
Love that.
that's kind of like where I come from, and I'm a product of people having a love ethic, not just in theory, but in practice, right? What does it look
Mm.
like to create a classroom, or to show up and to ask questions, and to stand with and to practice the way of Jesus in a way that is very tangible? And I think a large part of why I'm wired the way that I'm wired is because I had both people creating space for me, but also them pointing to my story being developed in a way that could also lend itself to others.
Oh man,
So
so
good.
good. I have a million things going through my head. When you think about your own healing journey, how did the Enneagram help you parse your own trauma?
Yeah. When I think about what does it mean to be an eight, right? A protector, right? Or someone who is very courageous. Like, these are some of the characteristics, right? Can be confrontational in many ways, both healthy and not and unhealthy, right? But I'm also a six, right? I score very high in a six, almost the same exact number as an eight. And loyalist, you're dependable, community minded, right? All of these things. And I realized when I was aware of how trauma was impacting me, and how it was causing me not to be open and not to find myself in a place of growth. Looking back on it, there was something in me that said that I am so dissatisfied with, where I am, what I am feeling. I had to tap into a courage. And now I know that's because I'm eight. And being courageous is not just about going out into the world and, being courageous for other people. Sometimes it's being courageous enough to confront yourself. And that may
Mm.
look like, going to therapy and being open. That may look like being courageous and being vulnerable in ways that allows the vulnerability itself to cause the healing process. That may be naming things that you've yet to confront. That may be naming your own junk in a way that causes you to take responsibility of the things that is being produced as trauma responses from what you've suffered, right? And so I think it was that, but it was also, I became not a visionary, but a questionary. I got plugged into a church at his early 20s, and most of my friendships were older deacons and older men who were twice my age. I mean, some of my closest friends that became mentors, and they allowed me to just ask questions. I asked questions about suffering, about poverty, about what they saw in me, about all types of things. And I think the questions in themselves was not necessarily me asking people to tell me who I am, as much as it was me learning from the mistakes and the honesty and the vulnerabilities of people who created space to not just allow me to be vulnerable, but be vulnerable themselves. And there's something healing about being in a space where you can name fully who you are, what you've gone through, what you've suffered through, without judgment, right? Where there's no prerequisites for love, right? You could just show fully up who you are as yourself. I think all of that played a part. And then I think just the divine allowing me to learn parts of myself. I think learning yourself is a blessing because it also shows you who you are not, right?
Yes. Yes.
And trauma seeks to tell you who you're not. Those narratives, whatever you have, that it's. I would consider those falsities or fallacies that you have playing over and over and over. But like learning yourself shows you that I'm not that. I'm more than this. I
Mm.
belong. I'm more than imposter syndrome. I'm more than what I've suffered through. I'm more than where I grew up. I'm more, I can write, I can speak, I can do all of these things. And that allows
Mm.
you within themselves
Good.
to tap into imagination. And the beautiful thing about imagination is that it allows you to see yourself beyond where you are, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I'm spitballing here, man. But I started collecting books. I started reading. I was an independent scholar for a while. I started doing poetry. All of the
Mm.
things that helped me to express myself. Expression is a pathway to healing, right?
Hmm.
And when I never say healed because none of us are fully healed. We're on a journey, right, of returning home.
Yes. You actually open your book with
That's
a
good.
yes, indeed. Actually open up a book in your book about a moving letter to your dad, who you reconciled with as an adult,
Yeah,
after he was largely absent, right, from your childhood. And tell me about that healing journey.
yeah. He was. My dad was a my little league coach for a number of years. We were in and out of each other's lives, which you know he was living in the city. Just a bunch of family conflict, but man, I never forget. I tell this story in the book. I received a call from my sister. I was in a meeting at that time. I was leading an organization, doing the work, and my sister who lives in DC just she keeps calling me, and then finally I step out of the meeting and I'm like, hey, what's going on? She says, our dad had just had a stroke, and he's being rushed to the hospital and it's pretty bad. They have to do emergency surgery. uh I was conflicted. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't talked to him in over a year, and I felt frozen. And the first thing I did, I picked up the phone and I called my wife, and I asked her, what should I do? And you know what she tells me? She says, go serve him and show it for him just like you do strangers.
Hmm.
Mm.
Wow. It gave me some guidance, right? Because I was just going to go home and wait around to hear, but she was right, you know, in the work at Love Beyond Walls, we serve people that we don't even know to create community. And that was a moment where I had to really wrestle with, do I believe this at my core? Is this my ethic? Is this part of how I'm wired, right? Um, to do this, not just, you know, as a leader in the public, and this is what people know me for, but can I even do this in the context of my own family when obviously there's some tension and conflict and all that? And my answer was yes. I go there and I served him. I walk in, he was still kind of paralyzed on his left side, and the doctors had gone in and they said that it was possibility that he would regain like movement, all those things, emergency surgery. And he turns over, man. He says, I'm glad you're here, T. That's what he used to call me. And I say, yeah, man, I'm grateful. I served my dad. I stayed with him in the hospital drove him home, the whole nine, kept serving him. And then shortly after, my dad started calling me every day. And we had these conversations. We would talk, at first it felt awkward, but then it was like, man, we became friends, and we would always end with, I love you, man. He would say, I love you too. And that led to more honest conversations around, forgiveness and mishaps and conflict. And that led to him asking me, when is the next time you're preaching in the church or speaking somewhere? I want to come hear you. I remember my dad for the first time came to hear me speak, and it was in front of like thousands of people. And afterwards, he came up to me and he was like, man, I'm proud of you. Um, you're my favorite communicator. And we started to build a bond. He would come over to the house and we would go fishing with my son. There you go, 3 generations, right? And we developed a friendship over time, and until he was diagnosed with cancer. And even then, like towards the last part of his life, uh, I got a chance to serve him. I preached his eulogy. But I'll never forget, man, we were in the hospital. I was sitting by his bed. We just heard from the doctor that there's nothing else that they could do, right? And we're just sitting with that. And I'm sitting with the anticipatory grief. And the eight in me, the unhealthy part of me, wants to like, I need to control this. And you feel powerless because there's nothing you can do. Like literally, I don't care what type you are, right? There's literally nothing you can do other than some miraculous intervention from the divine. And I sat there and I did what only any son would do. I pulled out my iPhone and I pressed record, audio record, I started asking him questions, and we got a chance. He told me about his life, his upbringing, some of the things that he was grateful for, how he loved to laugh. I mean, oh nine. And then we finally got to the part where he told me the reason why he committed his life to a faith journey, which from our perspective, it would be a relationship with Jesus and his relationship with the Lord. And he says, I asked him, I was like, why would you do this so late in life? And you know what he tells me? I have this recording. He says, you were the first one I told about that. My family went and saw him get baptized. He says, I just listened to it before this podcast. He says, he says, that's a portion of you that came to me. I was like, well, what do you mean? And he says, because I was watching you and your faith and how you were and what you were doing for people. And even in the audio recording, I'm telling him like I never knew that, but my dad had been watching me and what I had been doing and overcoming and like working through. And he had this secret or silent proudness that he had for me that I realized in the hospital. But greater than that, he was telling me that my life's witness and work pushed him into faith, right? Or encouraged him to pursue a pathway of faith. And that's heavy, man, to think like I won countless awards. They don't mean nothing. I've written 5 books, don't mean nothing. Spoken a lot of places don't mean nothing. But to hear my father say that, like if I've done all of this, so my pops could feel like he is transitioning into eternity with a faith that he felt grounded him. That's the work, man. That's the work. And you don't get there by pushing aside your shadows or not confronting yourself or, what if I would have, it's just, I'm thinking about that, like not only was I doing work in the community, I was doing work on myself. And thanks be to God.
I feel like I need to just take a moment and be quiet. Thank you, Terence. That was amazing. I'm really deeply grateful and moved. And, in the Middle Ages, this is going to sound maybe a little off topic, but it's not. There are these two words about the soul, or two different postures. One was pusillanimity. We get the word pusillanimous from, and it means defended soul, defended, right? Hard soul. And then the other one was magnanimity, from which we get the word magnanimous, which is a cruciform life. So it's not caved in on itself. It's not defended. It's actually one Anglican bishop called it the undefended life. And what is so remarkable about this conversation is how magnanimous you are.
Wow, thank you.
So we think about Jesus on the cross, and he's literally open-hearted, right? His arms are outstretched. His heart is exposed. He's vulnerable. He's open. And so it's this posture. And many eights that I meet, and I'm going to be honest, I have an 8 child who's an activist, and they sometimes when they were younger, it was a lot of this, this kind of boxer posture, like waiting to hit, waiting to be hit, waiting to duck, waiting to dodge and weave, And then when I meet an 8 who has done work, it's this crazy paradox that happens. The arms go out in a cross cruciform-like fashion, and the power is in the vulnerability. And the power is in the undefended heart. And what you just shared, better than maybe any 8 I have ever had on this show, was the health and the beauty of an integrated 8 with an open heart.
And that's the word, integration. That that word for the past years has been the word that I've tried to live from. That exact word, like the both and, right? It's the grief and the joy, the rose and the thorns, right? It's as one songwriter, I think Frankie Beverly says, joy and pain, right? In the old school music, right? It's the both and. But I think what I have learned and what I'm still learning is to push closer to integration, right? I remember right after, man, this intense grief work, and I'm still doing grief work. How do I keep my father alive? You created space for me just to do that. I mean, just for that question, right? Man, I was talking to somebody and they were saying, like, how are you processing it? I realized that my pops is still fathering me in grief. I'm learning more in grief than I did even in the moments that I was able to share, which I deeply cherish, and I miss his physical presence. But man, the richness of what I'm still learning as people ask me questions, as I speak this coming weekend, is integration. How can I integrate all of it? And most of us 8s, we want to compartmentalize, to say, hey, this belongs over here. Let me just, and it's like, no, it all blends together. And I think the greatest use of the divine in our lives is when we do integrate.
Yeah. As you were talking about your dad, I was thinking about, I've been thinking a lot about Mary at the tomb lately. And she's grief stricken, and Jesus shows up and she doesn't recognize him. And I got to thinking about how resurrection is at the heart of the universe, that things always come back, right? Like things don't actually die. They come They just will return in a form different than the one you expected.
Mm.
And that's why she couldn't
That's
recognize
good right there.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think about my own journey as a man, and I think my dad died from alcoholism and drug abuse, and led a very tragic life, and my love for him, for many times, I kind of dismissed it or tried to push it away, like, oh, I didn't really love him because he was such a jerk, he was not a nice person, he just was not a kind person. He was deeply wounded, a deeply mentally ill person, right? So I come to it with that mindset. I'm well past my years of therapy and being angry, I'm well past that now. But I realized too that, when things die in life, they will always come back to us in a different form. And I think about my own life, it came back as songs, and it came back as the lost love of my father came back in songs and in books. Wow. And in being a therapist and being a priest and celebrating the Eucharist. And these are the things that gave my life meaning. And so I just was, as you were talking about your dad, I was thinking, oh yeah, he's showing up in your grief, but and he will continue to show up. He's not dead.
Right.
He will continue to show up, albeit in a form that you might prefer it in a physical manifestation, but he is going to keep coming back because resurrection is at the core of the universe. He's just, he will come back in a different way, in a different form.
Yeah.
Yeah. The trick is to pay attention and recognize him when he's there.
Awareness. That's right. That's right.
Awareness. Hey, let me close with this because I could go on forever. I'm looking at the clock. I'm realizing, holy smokes, we've been going on forever here. But here's a question I have for you. If you had the ability to gather all of the world to an address that you were going to give, right? You had 5 minutes or 10 minutes to deliver an address to the world, a message to the world right now for this moment in time. What would you talk about?
Start with silence, because I think that's what we need right now. Silence. I would start with silence because noise is creating chaos in the moment. I would communicate this language of interconnectedness and being interrelated, and how we all need each other. That our humanity is wrapped up into the humanity of those who are around us, and then I would communicate this urgency of what it means to be seen, and affirming the inherent worth and value and the dignity of all people, because dignity belongs to all. And then I would move people towards compassion, right? What does it mean to be compassionate just to one? Because compassion in itself affords us, as Nouwen says, to weep with those who are weeping, be vulnerable with those who are vulnerable, to stand in solidarity with people who are suffering. And compassion is the very thing we need at this moment to change the world. Wow.
Terence, thank you so much for being on Typology. Today has been like just the richest gift, a gift I didn't know that I needed. And your presence is what brought it. And so I have a glimmering heart that is happy that I've had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you. By way of reminder to everybody listening, I've been speaking with Dr. Terence Lester, Enneagram 8. He is the founder of Love Beyond Walls. He is an author. He is a father. He is a contemplative. Dare I say, at moments bordering on this, you have a beautiful mystical quality to you, or leaning, that is just beautiful to be in the presence of, and I thank you for it, as I know Anthony does as well. So, peace and blessings to you, and to all of you listening. May you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, may you have rest. Until next time.